A CEO pushed a waitress into a shark-infested pool, and 2 minutes later, he was begging for mercy. But nothing about this night was supposed to go like this. A powerful man thought he could humiliate a young waitress for fun, live in front of millions. But the moment she hit the water, the whole world turned on him. And when he slipped in right after her, the sharks weren't the only danger closing in. What no one knew was that this waitress carried a secret from his past, a truth he hoped would never surface. And when the cameras caught every second, the internet unleashed a storm that neither of them could escape. Now the whole world is watching, because the woman he tried to destroy might be the only one who can save him, or end everything he built. When the power flips, and the victim becomes the one holding the truth, what happens next? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The Miami Marine Life Resort sparkled like a jewel against the evening sky, its modern glass walls reflecting the setting sun in shades of amber and gold. Inside the grand ballroom, the centerpiece shark tank cast rippling blue shadows across the polished marble floors. The massive aquarium stretched from floor to ceiling, its inhabitants gliding gracefully through crystal-clear water. Tessa Morgan stood in the staff preparation area, carefully adjusting her black apron strings with trembling fingers. She took several deep breaths, using the calming technique her grandmother had taught her. "Lord, give me strength," she whispered, smoothing down her crisp white uniform shirt. After losing her corporate cafe job for reporting discrimination, she couldn't afford to let anything shake her tonight. The event coordinator hustled past, clipboard in hand. "Remember everyone, this is being live-streamed to millions. Best behavior." She paused to check Tessa's name tag. "The champagne trays need refreshing every 15 minutes. And smile." Tessa nodded, lifting a silver tray of delicate flutes filled with golden bubbles. The weight felt familiar in her hands as she pushed through the swinging doors into the main ballroom. The space hummed with excitement, camera crews adjusting equipment, influencers touching up their makeup, wealthy donors arriving in designer evening wear that probably cost more than her yearly rent. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, extending her tray with a practiced, "Would you care for champagne?" Most guests barely glanced at her as they plucked their drinks, too absorbed in their conversations about followers and engagement rates. The few who did meet her eyes offered vacant smiles that didn't reach past their carefully applied makeup. A burst of raucous laughter drew attention to the main entrance. Ryder Quinn made his entrance like a king holding court, his tall frame clothed in an expertly tailored, charcoal suit that probably cost more than Tessa's car. A cluster of influencers orbited around him, phones held high to capture every moment. And then, you won't believe this, I had my team fill his entire office with rubber ducks while he was at lunch. Ryder's voice carried across the room as he described his latest viral video. His face when he opened that door? Priceless. 10 million views in just 2 hours. The influencer crowd erupted in exaggerated laughter, their phones recording every second. Tessa noticed how their eyes darted constantly between Ryder and their screens, hunting for the perfect moment to share. "Oh my God, Ryder! You're literally so iconic!" gushed a young woman with shocking pink hair, her press-on nails tapping rapidly at her phone screen. "The way you just don't care what anyone thinks." Tessa worked her way around the room's perimeter, keeping her expression neutral as she served drinks. The event manager hovered anxiously near the shark tank, checking and rechecking the evening's schedule while speaking urgently into her headset about lighting cues and camera angles. "Well, well, if it isn't the most serious server in Miami." Ryder's voice boomed suddenly beside her. Tessa stiffened, but kept her professional smile in place as she turned to face him. He stood too close, his cologne overwhelming, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Don't you ever laugh, sweetheart." "Can I offer you champagne, sir?" Tessa asked evenly, holding out her tray. She could feel the influencers' phones pointed at them, recording the interaction. "Come on, crack a smile for us." Ryder persisted, his own smile growing sharper. "Life's too short to be so uptight." "Right, everyone." His entourage murmured agreement, giggling behind their phones. "The service here is like, so stuck up," stage whispered one influencer to another, loud enough to ensure Tessa heard. Ryder's eyes lit up with sudden mischief, the same look Tessa had seen in his viral prank videos. "I know what we need, a little demonstration." He grabbed another full tray from a passing server. "Show us how it's done, sweetheart. Let's see your best server walk." Tessa's heart began to pound, but she kept her voice steady. "Sir, I need to attend to other guests." "Nonsense. This'll be great content." Ryder thrust the second tray at her. "Both hands now. Show us how you balance them. The cameras are rolling." The crowd had grown, forming a loose circle around them. Phones glowed everywhere like fireflies as dozens of people streamed the scene. Tessa could see the event manager hovering uncertainly at the edges, clearly torn between intervening and avoiding a scene with their celebrity guest. "Sir, please." Tessa started again, but Ryder was already positioning himself behind her, his hands on her shoulders making her skin crawl through her uniform. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," he announced to his live audience, "watch how our serious server handles a little surprise." Everything seemed to slow down as Tessa felt his hands shove hard against her back. The trays flew from her grasp as she stumbled forward, champagne glasses shattering on the floor. But the momentum carried her further, straight toward the Shark Tank's viewing panel. Her hands flew out instinctively as she crashed through the surface of the water with a tremendous splash. The shock of cold hit her like a physical blow. Chlorinated water filled her nose and mouth as she tumbled through the blue depths, her uniform dragging her down. Through the burning in her eyes, she could see dark shapes moving in the water around her. The sharks, disturbed by her sudden invasion of their space. Panic seized her chest as she kicked hard towards the surface, her lungs screaming for air. She broke through with a desperate gasp, her fingers scrabbling at the smooth sides of the tank. The sound of chaos erupted around her. Screams, shouts, the event manager's voice raised in alarm. But loudest of all was the cruel laughter, led by Ryder Quinn himself, as dozens of phones captured her humiliation for their followers' entertainment. Water streamed down her face as she clung to the tank's edge, her whole body shaking. Through blurred vision, she could see the horror on some faces in the crowd, the barely concealed amusement on others, and the cold calculation of the influencers who knew they'd just captured viral gold. Above it all was Ryder's face, flushed with the success of his prank, already turning to play to the cameras as she treaded water in her soaked uniform, surrounded by sharks. The event manager finally snapped into action, shouting for security and a ladder while guests pressed forward with their phones, not one of them offering a helping hand to the woman gasping in the tank. In that moment, as the cameras continued to roll and the sharks circled below, Tessa felt more alone than she ever had before. The crowd surged forward, phones raised high to capture every moment of Tessa's distress. Ryder Quinn threw his arms wide, playing to his audience with the practiced ease of a seasoned showman. His perfectly white teeth gleamed under the event lighting as he laughed. "Come on, people, it's just a prank," he called out, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "This is what viral content looks like." The event manager pushed through the crowd, her face pale with concern. "Mr. Quinn, this is completely inappropriate. We need to get her out immediately." But Ryder wasn't listening. He strutted closer to the tank's edge, where Tessa still clung desperately to the glass, her work uniform billowing around her in the water. Her dark hair plastered against her face as she tried to keep her head above the surface, all while avoiding the curious sharks that had begun to investigate this intrusion into their territory. "See, she's fine," Ryder declared, stepping even closer to the tank. "This'll get millions of views. You should be thanking me for the exposure." His designer shoes, crafted for style rather than grip, betrayed him on the wet marble floor. One foot slipped forward on the slick surface. His arms pinwheeled frantically as he fought for balance, his usual grace deserting him in an instant. Time seemed to slow as his body tilted backward, then forward, his momentum carrying him straight toward the tank. "Watch out!" someone screamed, but it was too late. Ryder's head cracked against the tank's edge before he plunged into the water, sending another massive splash through the gala. The crowd gasped collectively, their phones still recording every second of the unfolding disaster. Tessa treaded water, her heart pounding as she watched Ryder sink several feet below the surface. When he finally oriented himself and kicked upward, all his calculated cool was gone. He burst through the water with a terrified gasp, thrashing wildly. "Help!" he screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "Somebody help me!" Two reef sharks, disturbed by all the commotion, began circling closer. Their sleek grey bodies cut through the water with deadly grace, investigating the strange creatures that had invaded their space. Though not typically aggressive toward humans, the shark's presence sent fresh waves of terror through both swimmers. Ryder's thrashing grew more violent as he spotted the sharks. "Oh God, oh God!" He splashed frantically, trying to move away from the predators, but only drawing more attention to himself. "Get me out of here!" Tessa felt her old training kick in. Before her current job as a server, she'd spent 2 years as a marine rescue trainee. The knowledge flooded back as she watched Ryder's panic, putting them both in greater danger. "Stop thrashing!" she called out, her voice sharp with urgency. "You need to stay still!" But Ryder was beyond listening. His eyes were wide with terror as he continued to splash, his breaths coming in short, desperate gasps. The sharks drew closer, attracted by his erratic movements. "They're coming closer!" he shrieked. "Please, somebody do something!" The event manager was shouting into her radio for emergency services, while security guards rushed to find a ladder or rope. The influencer crowd that had been so eager to record Tessa's humiliation now captured Ryder's panic with equal enthusiasm, though a few had finally lowered their phones, realizing the situation had moved beyond entertainment. "Ryder!" Tessa called again, forcing herself to sound calm despite her own fear. "Listen to me. The more you thrash, the more interested they'll be. You have to stop moving!" One of the sharks glided within feet of them, its dorsal fin cutting the surface like a knife. Ryder let out another strangled cry of terror. But this time, when he turned toward Tessa, the arrogant CEO was gone. In his place was a frightened man who suddenly realized how completely out of control he was. His eyes locked with hers, wide and desperate. "Please," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Please don't let me die." The crowd's shouts grew more frantic as the sharks circled closer, their sleek bodies visible through the crystal-clear water. Security guards ran back and forth along the tank's edge, searching for any way to help, while the event manager's voice rose above the chaos, directing staff to clear the area. But in that moment, suspended in the water with death gliding beneath them, Tessa and Ryder were entirely alone with their fear. The two reef sharks made another pass, closer this time, their movements smooth and purposeful. Ryder's breathing grew more ragged with each circuit, his usually perfectly styled hair plastered to his forehead, all pretense of control completely abandoned. The man who had confidently pushed her into danger minutes ago now depended entirely on her knowledge to survive. Water lapped at their faces as they treaded water, the chlorine burning their eyes. The elegant gala continued to dissolve into chaos around them, But inside the tank, time seemed to slow to the rhythm of the sharks' movements and their own struggling heartbeats. Through the chaos of screams and splashing, a security guard's voice cut across the pandemonium. "Catch this!" he shouted, sliding a long pool skimmer pole across the deck toward the tank. Tessa's fingers grasped the floating pole, muscle memory from her marine rescue days taking over. She positioned herself between Ryder and the approaching sharks, using the pole to create a barrier. The familiar motions helped calm her racing heart. "Keep your eyes on me," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of her old training. "The sharks are more scared of us than we are of them. We're going to move slowly toward the edge." Ryder nodded frantically, his teeth chattering. Above them, guests and staff scrambled to help, tossing down ropes and reaching out with their hands. The sharks continued their curious circles, but the pole's presence seemed to give them pause. "Small movements," Tessa instructed, keeping her voice steady despite her soaked clothes weighing her down. "Follow my lead. Don't splash." They inched toward the tank's edge, Tessa maintaining the protective barrier with the skimmer pole while guiding Ryder with clear commands. "Reach for the edge. That's it. Now grab the rope they're lowering." Several pairs of hands reached down to help as Ryder finally got hold of the tank's edge. His fingers scraped against the glass as he struggled to find purchase, leaving streaks of red where his skin broke against the surface. With collective effort from those above, they managed to hoist him up and over. Ryder collapsed onto the deck, water pooling beneath him as he curled into himself, body racked with uncontrollable sobs. His expensive suit was ruined, his arm bleeding from where he'd scraped it during the climb out. The crowd's phones captured every second of his breakdown, live-streaming his vulnerability to millions. Tessa climbed out next, declining offered hands in favor of pulling herself up. Her uniform clung to her body as she shivered in the air-conditioned ballroom. Already phones were lighting up with notifications as the incident went viral. Hashtags like Ryder Quinn cancelled and Justice for Tessa began trending within minutes. The gala manager rushed forward, concern etched across her face. "Ms. Morgan, please come with me," she said, guiding Tessa away from the crowd. "We need to get you warm and dry." They led her to a back office where clean towels and a spare set of staff clothes awaited. The manager's hands shook slightly as she handed Tessa a steaming cup of tea. "Ms. Morgan, I want you to know that the resort takes incidents like this very seriously. Would you like to press charges? We have multiple video angles of the assault and several witness statements already." Tessa wrapped her hands around the warm cup, considering the question as water dripped from her hair. The manager continued, "We've already contacted the police, and they'll want to speak with you. Mr. Quinn's actions were completely unacceptable." While Tessa changed and warmed up, her phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Online, the story was exploding. Major sponsors of Ryder's company began issuing statements distancing themselves from him. Video clips of him shoving her played on repeat across social media, with new angles emerging every minute. "Take all the time you need," the manager said softly, leaving Tessa alone with her thoughts. An hour later, Tessa stepped back into the main hall, now mostly empty, except for essential staff and a few lingering guests. The shark tank loomed silent and still, its occupants having retreated to deeper water after the commotion. Ryder sat alone near the tank, a metallic emergency blanket draped over his shoulders. His usual perfectly styled appearance was completely undone. Hair plastered to his forehead, makeup streaked, designer suit ruined. He looked small somehow, diminished by the evening's events. As Tessa walked past, his head snapped up. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by something that looked like shock and fear. "Tessa Morgan," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "It's you." Tessa stopped mid-step, confusion replacing her careful composure. The way he said her name carried weight, as if it meant something specific to him. but she had never met him before tonight. Had she? She stood frozen, trying to make sense of his reaction, as the emergency blanket crinkled with his slight trembling. The hall fell silent, except for the gentle lapping of water against the tank's glass walls. In that moment, standing before the man who had pushed her into danger, then depended on her for survival, Tessa felt an unsettling mix of emotions. Why did he know her name? What was the recognition in his eyes about? In the aftermath of the tank incident, security personnel moved swiftly to create a barrier between the remaining guests and the central area where paramedics were now attending to Ryder. Their blue latex gloves stood out starkly against his pale skin as they cleaned the shallow cuts on his arms, sustained from his desperate climb out of the tank. Tessa stood near the service entrance, her still damp hair curling around her shoulders. Her mind kept circling back to the way Ryder had said her name, the flash of recognition in his eyes that made no sense. She watched as one of the paramedics applied antiseptic to his wounds, causing him to wince. "Ms. Morgan?" A police officer approached, notebook in hand. "We need to take your statement about what happened tonight." Tessa wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling exposed despite the dry clothes. I think I need some time," she said quietly. "Everything happened so fast." The officer nodded sympathetically. "I understand, but the sooner we can get your account, the better. We have multiple videos of the incident, but your perspective is crucial." Before Tessa could respond, a commotion erupted near the main entrance. A group of well-dressed people had arrived, their faces tight with concern as they huddled around their phones. Ryder's PR team had finally shown up, but they looked overwhelmed. One woman was frantically making calls while another tried to draft a statement on her tablet. "This is bad," one PR representative muttered to another. "The videos are everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. It's spreading faster than we can track." "Mr. Quinn deeply regrets his actions." Another team member practiced aloud, then shook her head. "No, that sounds too corporate." Their attempts at damage control seemed futile. Every few minutes, someone would announce another major sponsor pulling out or a new hashtag trending. The videos of the incident were multiplying, showing the push from different angles, each one making Ryder look worse than the last. Ryder struggled to his feet, shrugging off the emergency blanket. He limped slightly, whether from the fall or simple exhaustion, it wasn't clear. His eyes found Tessa across the room, and he took a hesitant step in her direction. "Miss, please stay back," a security guard said, moving to block his path. "I just need to talk to her," Ryder pleaded, his voice cracking. "Tessa, please. I want to go home," Tessa said firmly to the security guard. "I don't want to speak with him." The guard nodded, calling over two colleagues to escort her safely to her car. As she walked away, she could hear Ryder's PR team trying to hustle him out through a side exit, away from the few remaining photographers. The drive home felt surreal. Streetlights blurred past her window as she tried to process everything that had happened. Her phone kept buzzing with messages from friends and family who had seen the videos, but she couldn't bring herself to respond yet. In her small apartment, Tessa stood under the shower's hot spray for a long time, letting the warmth chase away the last of the tank water's chill. When she finally emerged, she saw 3 missed calls from her grandmother. Wrapping herself in her softest robe, Tessa called back, sinking into her worn couch as her grandmother's familiar voice filled the line. "Baby girl, are you all right?" her grandmother asked, concern evident in her tone. "I saw what happened on the news." "I'm okay, Grandma," Tessa assured her, though her voice wavered slightly. "Just shaken up. That man had no right to put his hands on you," her grandmother said firmly. "But you showed such grace under pressure, helping him even after what he did. Your grandfather would have been proud." Tears welled up in Tessa's eyes at the mention of her late grandfather. I couldn't just let him drown, Grandma, no matter what he did. That's because you have a good heart, child, but don't let anyone take advantage of that goodness. They talked for another 20 minutes, her grandmother's wise words and gentle humor helping to settle Tessa's nerves. After hanging up, she pulled up social media, unable to resist checking the ongoing fallout. The incident had exploded beyond anything she could have imagined. Ryder Quinnis' overparty was trending nationwide. Company stocks were plummeting. Former employees were coming forward with stories of toxic workplace culture. Then she saw it, a thread that made her blood run cold. Someone had connected the dots between Ryder's company and a harassment cover-up from 2 years ago. Tessa's hands shook as she scrolled through the details, memories flooding back. The same company. The same pattern of behavior she had tried to report. The same dismissal and eventual termination when she wouldn't stay quiet. She remembered typing up her report with shaking hands, gathering her courage to submit it to HR. She remembered the crushing disappointment when she was called into a meeting and told her services were no longer required. "He remembers me," she whispered into the quiet of her apartment, finally understanding the recognition in his eyes at the gala. He had known exactly who she was when he singled her out. He had known all along. Sunlight filtered through Tessa's curtains the next morning, waking her to the insistent buzz of her phone. She blinked, disoriented, before the memories of last night came rushing back. Her screen was filled with notifications, hundreds of them. "Oh my goodness," she muttered, sitting up in bed. Messages poured in from every direction. Journalists requesting interviews, old co-workers offering support, and countless strangers praising her composure during the crisis. Many called her a hero for helping Ryder despite his cruel prank. One message from a local news station caught her eye. "Your quick thinking saved lives last night. Would you consider sharing your story?" Tessa set the phone down, overwhelmed. She hadn't asked for any of this attention. Across town, in his luxury penthouse, Ryder Quinn's morning was taking a drastically different turn. His phone rang with his board chairman's stern voice on the other end. "The board has voted to temporarily freeze your executive authority," the chairman stated flatly. "Until this crisis is resolved, all major decisions will require board approval." Before Ryder could protest, another call beeped through, one of his biggest investors announcing their withdrawal. "We cannot maintain ties with leadership that demonstrates such reckless behavior," the investor declared. Ryder's hands trembled as he paced his marble floors. He tried calling his 11-year-old son, desperate for some comfort, but his ex-wife answered instead. "Are you kidding me?" she hissed. "After that stunt? Tommy saw the video, Ryder. He's terrified of you right now. No, you cannot speak to him." "Please," Ryder begged, his voice cracking. "He's my son." "Maybe you should have thought about that before pushing an innocent woman into a shark tank for laughs. Call when you've grown up." The line went dead. Desperate, Ryder dialed his mother's number. If anyone could help him make sense of this nightmare, it would be her. After 3 rings, her familiar voice answered. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said quietly. "Mom, everything's falling apart," Ryder admitted, sinking onto his leather couch. His mother sighed deeply. "Sweetheart, I've watched you change over these past few years. The son I raised understood the value of treating people with dignity. What happened to that boy? It was supposed to be funny," he whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to him. "Hurting others is never funny," she replied firmly. "You've lost your way, Ryder. Success has hardened your heart. That young woman could have been seriously injured, or worse." Tessa's face flashed through his mind, bringing with it a wave of memories he'd tried to bury. 2 years ago, she had stood in his office, presenting evidence of harassment within his company. He remembered dismissing her concerns with a wave of his hand, treating her like an inconvenience rather than a human being with valid concerns. "I knew her, Mom," he admitted. "Before last night, I did something terrible." "Then perhaps this is your wake-up call," his mother said gently. "A chance to make things right." Meanwhile, Tessa sat at her small kitchen table, debating whether to go to work. Her phone rang. It was her manager. "Tessa, please don't worry about coming in," her manager said kindly. "The company has approved paid leave for as long as you need. We've also arranged for security protection, given all the media attention." "Security?" Tessa repeated, stunned. "There are reporters camped outside the restaurant already. Take some time. Rest. We've got your back." Throughout the day, Tessa alternated between watching the news coverage and trying to distract herself with household chores. Every channel seemed to be playing the incident on loop. Social media was flooded with think pieces about privilege, accountability, and corporate culture. As evening fell, she sat on the edge of her bed, emotions churning. Part of her wanted to speak out, to finally tell her story about what happened at Ryder's company. Another part wished she could simply disappear until the whole thing blew over. In his penthouse, Ryder scrolled through countless messages from friends, colleagues, and social media followers begging him to make things right. His PR team had drafted several apology statements, but none of them felt genuine. How could he apologize when he was only now beginning to understand the depth of his mistakes? He found himself looking at old company photos, stopping at one from 2 years ago. There was Tessa in the background, smiling professionally at a corporate event. She had tried to make his company better, to address real problems, and he had treated her like she was nothing. As night settled over Miami, both Tessa and Ryder lay awake in their respective beds, minds racing with thoughts of their past collision. Tessa remembered the courage it had taken to speak up, and the devastation of being silenced. Ryder remembered the casual cruelty with which he had dismissed her concerns, never imagining their paths would cross again in such a dramatic way. The city lights twinkled outside their windows as exhaustion finally pulled them toward sleep, each wondering what tomorrow would bring. Their lives had become intertwined in ways neither could have predicted, and there was no going back to the way things were before. The official notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 days after the incident. Tessa stared at the crisp white envelope on her kitchen counter, her coffee growing cold beside it. The letterhead belonged to the Miami-Dade County Court, and her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "Notice of Restorative Justice Mediation," she read aloud, her stomach tightening. "The Marine Life Resort Charity Foundation, in conjunction with the court, requests your presence." She set the letter down, unable to finish reading. The thought of being in the same room as Ryder Quinn made her feel sick. She picked up her phone and dialed her grandmother's number. "I can't do this, Grandma," Tessa said as soon as her grandmother answered. "They want me to sit down with him, to talk things through. I can't." Her grandmother's warm voice carried decades of wisdom. "Child, take a deep breath. Tell me what's really scaring you." Tessa sank into her kitchen chair. Everything. Seeing him again. Having to relive not just the tank incident, but everything that happened at his company. "I'm afraid I'll freeze up, or worse, that I'll explode." Sometimes the things that scare us most are exactly what we need to face. Her grandmother said softly, "Remember what I always told you about thorns in your foot? That you have to pull them out, even if it hurts," Tessa replied, remembering countless childhood lessons. "Because leaving them in only makes the wound worse." Exactly. Healing comes from confronting, not avoiding. You've carried this hurt for 2 years, baby girl. Maybe it's time to pull out that thorn. Across town, in his luxury penthouse, Ryder Quinn received the same notice. He hadn't shaved in days, and his usually immaculate appearance had given way to wrinkled clothes and dark circles under his eyes. His phone kept buzzing with messages from his board members, but he ignored them all. The mediation was scheduled for 2 o'clock that afternoon at a neutral location, a community center downtown. Tessa arrived early, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. The meeting room was simple but welcoming, with large windows letting in natural light and comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. The mediator, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, greeted Tessa warmly. "I'm Sarah Collins," she said, extending her hand. "I'll be facilitating today's session. Would you like some water while we wait?" Tessa nodded, grateful for something to hold on to. A few minutes later, footsteps in the hallway made her tense. Ryder Quinn entered the room, and Tessa barely recognized him. Gone was the polished CEO who had terrorized her at the gala. This man looked beaten down, his designer clothes wrinkled, his face unshaven. He wouldn't meet her eyes as he took his seat. "Thank you both for coming," Sarah began, her voice steady and professional. "I know this isn't easy. The purpose of restorative justice is to address harm in a way that promotes healing and accountability, rather than just punishment. Mr. Quinn, would you like to begin?" Ryder cleared his throat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. I prepared something, but now it all feels wrong." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "The truth is, I've been awful, not just at the gala, but for years. When you came to me about the harassment complaints, Ms. Morgan, I dismissed you because I thought I was untouchable. I thought everything was a joke, that my success meant I could treat people however I wanted." Tessa felt tears pricking at her eyes, but refused to let them fall. She hadn't expected this level of honesty. "I'm sorry," he continued, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry for pushing you into that tank, for humiliating you, for not listening when you tried to make our company better. I've lost my son's respect, my company's trust, and my own sense of who I am. I deserve all of it." Sarah nodded encouragingly. "Tessa, would you like to respond?" "Do you know what it feels like?" Tessa asked, her voice quiet but firm. "To have someone treat your life like it's worthless? When I reported those harassment cases, I was trying to protect people. You didn't just ignore me, you fired me. And then at the gala, you treated me like a prop for your entertainment. I could have died." The Foundation and the court have proposed an alternative to traditional litigation, Sarah explained, opening a folder. "It's a comprehensive rehabilitation program that includes 300 hours of community service, mandatory counseling sessions, public accountability statements, and personal growth workshops. The goal is transformation, not just punishment." Ryder nodded slowly. "I'll do whatever it takes. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to try to be better." The meeting continued for another hour, with Sarah guiding them through difficult conversations about impact, responsibility, and change. When it was over, Tessa walked out into the bright Miami sunshine, her emotions swirling. Part of her wanted to believe in Ryder's apparent sincerity, while another part remained skeptical. The weight of the past 2 years, combined with the trauma of the gala, felt overwhelming. Inside the conference room, Ryder stood alone by the window, watching Tessa's retreating figure. His carefully constructed world had crumbled in the space of a few days, leaving him face to face with the person he'd become. The path to redemption seemed impossibly long, and he wasn't sure he deserved to walk it. But for the first time in years, he felt something real beneath all the artifice, a desperate desire to change. "Mr. Quinn," Sarah called from the doorway, "we'll need to schedule your first community service session." He turned from the window, nodding slowly. The sunlight caught the dust motes floating in the air, making them look like tiny stars falling around him. Whether redemption was possible or not, he had no choice but to try. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the Miami Marine Rescue Center's parking lot as Tessa arrived for her first day supervising Ryder's community service. She sat in her car for a few extra minutes, watching seagulls wheel overhead and trying to calm her racing heart. The steering wheel felt cool under her fingers as she took deep breaths, reminding herself that this was part of her job now. The rescue center was already alive with activity when she walked in. The salty air mixed with the familiar scent of fish food and cleaning supplies. Staff members moved purposefully between tanks, checking on injured sea creatures and preparing the day's meals. Tessa loved this place. It had been her sanctuary after losing her tech job, a place where healing happened every day. At exactly 7 o'clock, a black SUV pulled into the lot. Ryder stepped out wearing jeans and a plain grey t-shirt, so different from his usual designer suits. He carried a water bottle and what looked like a packed lunch, appearing uncertain as he approached the entrance. "Good morning," Tessa said formally, meeting him at the door. "We'll start with orientation and safety protocols." Ryder nodded, following her inside. "Thank you for being willing to supervise this. I'm doing it because the center needs volunteers," she replied, her voice controlled. "Not for you." As they walked through the facility, Tessa explained the basic rules and procedures. Ryder listened intently, taking notes on his phone, asking appropriate questions about safety measures and cleaning protocols. His humility seemed genuine, but Tessa couldn't forget their history. In the break room, while showing him where to store his lunch, the weight of the past became too heavy to ignore. "Do you even remember why you fired me?" she asked suddenly, her voice tight with emotion. Ryder's face paled. I remember you came to my office about harassment complaints." "That's not the whole story." Tessa's hands trembled slightly as she continued. "I had documented 6 months of racial harassment in the engineering department. Slurs written on desks, jokes about my hair, my skin. Someone left a noose drawing in my cubicle." Ryder's eyes widened with horror. I never knew about—" "Because you didn't want to know," Tessa cut in. "When I brought the evidence to HR, they sent me to you. And you said, I'll never forget this, you said I was being too sensitive and hurting company morale. Then you fired me for not being a cultural fit." She watched as the full impact of his past actions hit him. Ryder sank into a chair, his face ashen. "I lost everything," Tessa continued, her voice steady despite the pain. "My apartment, my savings, nearly ended up homeless. Do you know how hard it is to find tech work when a CEO like you blackballs you?" Tears welled in Ryder's eyes, but he blinked them back. I was so wrapped up in my own power, in thinking I was always right. I didn't want to see the real damage I was causing." "Well, now you're here to work," Tessa said, straightening her shoulders. "Let's start with the worst job, cleaning the filtration tanks." For the next several hours, she put Ryder through the most demanding tasks. He hauled heavy buckets of fish, scrubbed algae from tank walls, and helped prepare meals for the rescued animals. His designer watch was tucked away, his hands red from cleaning solutions, sweat staining his shirt. To his credit, he never complained. He followed every instruction carefully, asked questions when needed, and showed genuine interest in the animals' care. During lunch break, Tessa noticed him sitting alone, staring at his sandwich without eating, lost in thought. As the day progressed, they worked mostly in silence, broken only by necessary communication about tasks. The afternoon sun filtered through the large windows, catching the spray from the tanks and creating tiny rainbows. Tessa found herself watching Ryder as he methodically cleaned a turtle tank, noting how different he seemed from the arrogant CEO who had tormented her at the gala. When dusk began to fall, casting long shadows through the facility, they finished the last tasks of the day. Ryder's clothes were soaked, his hands pruned from hours in water, but he had completed every job without protest. As they walked to the parking lot, he stopped suddenly. "Tessa," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm sorry for what I did to you then. And now." The words hung in the humid evening air between them. Tessa didn't respond. She got into her car, closed the door, and gripped the steering wheel tightly. The weight of their shared past pressed against her chest like a physical thing. As she drove home, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, but she barely noticed its beauty. Her mind was too full of memories, both old and new, of the man who had caused her so much pain, now seeking redemption through simple, honest work. The day's events played over and over in her thoughts. Ryder's shocked face as she revealed the full story of her firing, his quiet determination to complete each task, the genuine remorse in his voice as he apologized. It was too much to process, too complex to untangle. She drove in silence, her knuckles white on the steering wheel, as Miami's evening traffic flowed around her like water. The following days unfolded like a carefully planned lesson in humility. Each morning, Ryder arrived at the Marine Rescue Center precisely on time, wearing simple work clothes that grew increasingly worn and stained. Tessa noticed he'd stopped styling his hair and had traded his designer watch for a basic digital timepiece that could handle getting wet. "Today we're checking vitals on the rescued sea turtles," Tessa explained on Monday morning. She demonstrated the proper technique for handling the creatures. "You need to be gentle but confident. They can sense hesitation." Ryder nodded, his face a mask of concentration. But when he reached for the first turtle, his hands shook slightly. The turtle, sensing his uncertainty, twisted away and nipped his finger. "Ouch!" He jerked back, examining the small red mark. "That's why we stay focused," Tessa said, keeping her voice neutral. "Try again." By Wednesday, new challenges emerged. Ryder was tasked with sorting fresh fish for the animals' meals. He lifted a heavy bucket, attempting to carry it across the facility, but his grip slipped. The container crashed to the floor, sending fish sliding across the tiles in all directions. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, already dropping to his knees to clean up the mess. "I'll fix this." Tessa watched as he gathered each fish, his expensive jeans soaking up water from the floor. There was no trace of the entitled CEO who would have once called for someone else to handle the cleanup. During a particularly challenging afternoon, Ryder was helping at the touch pool when a feisty blue crab latched onto his thumb. His yelp of surprise drew attention from nearby visitors, but instead of making a scene, he carefully extracted his hand and continued his work, a small smile playing at his lips. "These little guys have quite a grip," he said to a wide-eyed child watching nearby. "But they're just trying to protect themselves. Can't blame them for that." After his shifts at the rescue center, Ryder attended mandatory anti-racism workshops. Tessa heard from other volunteers that he sat quietly in the back, taking notes and rarely speaking unless asked directly. When he did speak, it was to acknowledge his past failures and ask questions about doing better. The community service events proved equally enlightening. At a local food bank, he worked alongside retired teachers and former corporate executives who had found purpose in serving others. They shared their stories freely, not impressed by his former status or wealth. It was at the community center where Ryder faced some of his toughest lessons. The seniors there, particularly the veterans, had no patience for self-pity or performative change. One afternoon, an older veteran named Jack, his weathered face creased with wisdom earned through hard years, pulled Ryder aside. "You keep talking about how bad you feel," Jack observed, his voice gruff but not unkind. about how much you want to prove you've changed. Ryder started to respond, but Jack held up a hand. Redemption only works if you stop being the star of your own show, he said firmly. Real change happens when you forget about the audience and just do what's right because it's right. Those words seemed to strike something deep in Ryder. Tessa noticed a shift in his behavior afterward. He stopped mentioning his progress or seeking approval. Instead, he simply showed up, did the work, and paid attention to the needs around him. By Friday, the transformation was subtle but undeniable. During the morning briefing, when a new volunteer interrupted Tessa's instructions, Ryder gently redirected the conversation back to her. At lunch, he noticed an elderly custodian struggling with a heavy trash bag and quietly took over the task without drawing attention to himself. The most telling moment came during an emergency rescue of a stranded dolphin. While the medical team worked, Ryder handled the unglamorous job of keeping towels wet and clean without a single complaint or attempt to insert himself into the more visible roles. That evening, as the rescue center prepared to close, Tessa found herself pausing in the doorway of the main hallway. Ryder was sweeping, his movements methodical and thorough. He wasn't performing for anyone, most of the staff had already left. He was simply doing what needed to be done, making sure the space was clean and ready for the next day's work. The fluorescent lights cast soft shadows as he moved down the corridor, careful to reach into corners and under benches. His face held a look of quiet concentration, so different from the artificial charm he'd once wielded like a weapon. There was something profound in the simplicity of the moment. A man who had once commanded boardrooms and manipulated markets, now finding peace in the simple act of sweeping a floor. Tessa stood there, watching silently, struck by the realization that the change in Ryder wasn't just in his actions, but in the spirit behind them. The desperate need to be seen, to be praised, to be the center of attention. It had been replaced by something quieter and more genuine. In the gentle swish of the broom against the floor, she heard the sound of true transformation beginning to take root. The community center's dining hall buzzed with afternoon activity as volunteers arranged chairs and set up long tables covered in cheerful yellow tablecloths. Tessa adjusted her name tag and watched Ryder arrive through the front entrance, looking slightly uncertain in his plain button-down shirt and khakis, a far cry from his usual designer suits. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said, handing him an apron. Ryder took it with a grateful nod. "Thank you for inviting me. What do you need me to do?" "We're serving lunch to about 75 seniors today. You'll be on the serving line with me." She gestured toward the steel warming trays being set up. "Just follow my lead." The kitchen filled with the aroma of home-cooked food as volunteers brought out trays of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Ryder tied his apron and stood beside Tessa, carefully listening as she explained portion sizes and serving procedures. "Remember," she added, "some of our guests might need extra time or assistance. Patience is important." The seniors began arriving, filling the room with cheerful chatter and the soft tap of canes against linoleum. Ryder's shoulders tensed slightly as he picked up the serving spoon, but he managed a genuine smile as the first guests approached. "Well, look who it is," said Margaret, a tiny woman with snow-white hair and twinkling eyes. "Our famous volunteer. How are you finding our little community, dear?" Ryder carefully served her a portion of mashed potatoes. "It's teaching me more than I ever expected, Ma'am." "Good answer." She winked. "And please, it's Margaret." As the lunch service continued, Tessa noticed how Ryder relaxed into the role. He learned quickly which seniors preferred extra gravy and who needed help carrying their plates. He listened patiently to stories about grandchildren and nodded sympathetically to complaints about arthritis. Most importantly, he stayed focused on serving rather than being served. Jack, the veteran who had given Ryder such pointed advice earlier that week, made his way through the line. "Looking more comfortable today, son," he observed, holding out his plate. "Thank you, sir. I'm trying to remember what you said about not being the star of the show." Jack's weathered face creased in approval. "Seems like maybe you're actually listening for once." The serving line gradually emptied as the seniors settled in to enjoy their meal. Tessa and Ryder filled their own plates and found seats at a table near the kitchen. The room hummed with conversation and laughter, creating a warm atmosphere that seemed to affect everyone present. Halfway through the meal, one of the regular volunteers clinked her glass for attention. "As always, we'd love to hear from anyone who'd like to share something with the group today." Several seniors took turns sharing news about grandchildren's achievements or upcoming doctor's appointments. Then, unexpectedly, Ryder stood up. The room quieted as people turned to look at him. He began, his voice shaky. "I wasn't planning to speak, but being here today, seeing all of you." He paused, taking a deep breath. "Most of you probably know who I am from the news. You've seen the video of what I did at that gala." Tessa felt herself tense, unsure where this was going, but something in Ryder's demeanor made her stay silent. "That night, when I was in that tank, terrified and certain I was going to die, I saw myself clearly for the first time in years." His voice grew stronger, though his hands trembled slightly. "I saw a man who had become so focused on his own importance that he'd forgotten how to be human, who thought it was funny to hurt others for attention, who had ignored or dismissed people who needed help, including Tessa." The room remained absolutely silent as he continued. "Being here, working at the Marine Center, serving lunch today, it's shown me what real strength looks like. It's not about power or followers or trying to be the center of attention. It's about showing up, doing what needs to be done, and caring about others more than yourself." Tears glistened in his eyes as he spoke. "I'm not proud of who I was, but I'm grateful for this chance to change, even though it came through my own terrible choices. And I'm especially grateful to Tessa, who could have pressed charges, but instead gave me an opportunity to learn and grow." As he sat down, the room erupted in applause. Several seniors wiped their eyes, and Margaret reached over to pat his hand. Jack gave a firm nod of approval from across the room. Tessa felt her own eyes growing moist. She had watched Ryder's gradual transformation over the past weeks, but this raw honesty, this public acknowledgement of his failures and genuine gratitude, touched something deep inside her. After lunch, as volunteers cleaned up and seniors began heading home, Tessa and Ryder walked together toward the parking lot. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement, and a gentle breeze stirred the leaves of nearby trees. "Thank you," Ryder said softly, stopping beside his car, "for giving me a chance, for not giving up on me even when I probably deserved it." Tessa studied his face, seeing genuine humility where arrogance had once resided. "Keep going," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. "Don't stop." They got into their separate cars as the sun continued its slow descent. Tessa watched in her rearview mirror as Ryder's vehicle turned onto the main road, heading in the opposite direction from her own route home. Something had shifted today, a fragile thread of hope beginning to weave its way through the complicated tapestry of their shared story. The late afternoon light painted the sky in soft shades of gold and pink as they drove their separate ways, each carrying the weight of the day's events and the lightness of new possibilities. The morning started like any other at the Marine Rescue Center. Tessa arrived early, checking on the recovering SEALs and preparing their breakfast. Her phone buzzed with a news alert, but she ignored it, focused on her tasks. It wasn't until her co-worker Sarah rushed in, face flushed with concern, that her world tilted sideways. "Tessa, have you seen the video? It's all over social media." What video? Tessa wiped her hands on her coveralls, reaching for her phone. The footage played in grainy quality, clearly from a security camera inside Ryder's company. In it, Ryder sat at a conference table with several executives, laughing as he outlined what seemed to be a publicity stunt involving the charity gala. Think about it, the Ryder in the video said, gesturing enthusiastically. A viral moment that'll get everyone talking. We stage a dramatic incident, then follow up with a redemption story. The press will eat it up. Tessa's hands shook as she watched. The timestamp showed the meeting took place just 2 weeks before the gala. Her stomach churned as comments and reposts flooded her screen, each one more damning than the last. I can't believe this, she whispered, sinking onto a nearby stool. The past weeks of watching Ryder change, of seeing genuine remorse in his actions. Had it all been another performance? Her phone started ringing. Ryder's name flashed on the screen. She declined the call, then another, and another. Text messages began pouring in. Tessa, please let me explain. This isn't what it looks like. I swear I didn't stage any of this. But the evidence seemed overwhelming. Major news outlets picked up the story within hours. Sponsors who had tentatively stood by Ryder now announced they were suing for fraud. His company's board called an emergency meeting and released a statement by noon. In light of recent revelations, the board has voted unanimously to terminate Ryder Quinn's position as CEO, effective immediately. We apologize to our shareholders, employees, and the public for this breach of trust. Tessa tried to focus on her work, but her hands trembled as she prepared medications for the animals. Every notification made her jump. Every concerned look from her co-workers felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Around 2 o'clock, her grandmother called. "Baby, are you okay?" Her voice was warm with worry. "I feel so stupid, Gran." Tessa's voice cracked. I actually believed he was changing, that all this time working together meant something. "Don't you dare feel stupid for having hope," her grandmother said firmly. "Having faith in people's capacity to change isn't weakness, it's strength." But he played me. Again. Tears rolled down Tessa's cheeks. Just like when I reported the harassment years ago, he probably knew exactly who I was at the gala and targeted me on purpose. Before her grandmother could respond, Tessa's other line beeped. It was Ryder again. She ignored it. At least hear his side. Her grandmother suggested gently. "Remember what we talked about. Healing comes from confronting, not avoiding." "I can't, Gran. Not right now." The afternoon dragged on endlessly. Tessa's phone continued buzzing with messages from reporters, seeking comments and friends offering support. She turned it to silent and buried herself in work, finding comfort in the simple routines of caring for the animals. Meanwhile, across town, Ryder's world was crumbling. He sat in his now empty office, watching movers pack up his belongings as security stood by. His hands shook as he tried calling Tessa for the 20th time. "Sir." His assistant appeared in the doorway. "It's your mother. She's been taken to Miami General. They think it might be her heart." Ryder's face went pale. He grabbed his keys and ran for the elevator, leaving everything else behind. The drive to the hospital was a blur of panic and guilt. His mother had warned him for years about his growing ego, about losing sight of what mattered. Now her words echoed in his mind as he searched for a parking spot. In the emergency room, he found his mother hooked up to monitors, her face drawn and tired. She reached for his hand weakly. "The doctor says it was just anxiety," she whispered. But seeing that video, watching everything fall apart again, it was too much. "Mom, I swear I didn't stage anything." His voice broke. Someone edited that footage. The meeting was about a different marketing campaign entirely. "I believe you." She squeezed his hand. But belief isn't enough anymore, Ryder. You need proof. As evening settled over Miami, Tessa sat at her small dining table, staring at her silent phone. 37 missed calls from Ryder. Dozens of unread messages. The betrayal felt like a physical weight on her chest. She thought about the senior luncheon just 2 days ago, how sincere he had seemed. How his vulnerability had touched everyone present. Had it all been an act? Part of her wanted to believe him when he said he was innocent, but the evidence was damning. Outside Miami General, Ryder sat in his car in the darkened parking lot. His mother was staying overnight for observation. His company was gone. His reputation was destroyed. And worst of all, he'd lost Tessa's trust just when he'd finally earned it. He buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. "I really tried," he whispered into the empty car. "And I still failed." The night settled around him, as dark and heavy as his thoughts, while somewhere across the city, Tessa's phone continued to sit silent on her table, unanswered. The morning after his mother's hospital scare, Ryder Quinn stood in his penthouse bedroom, staring at an old photograph of his father's fishing cabin. The simple wooden structure sat nestled among towering pines, its weathered deck stretching toward a pristine lake. His hands trembled as he packed a small duffel bag with essentials, just enough clothes for a week, his laptop, and basic toiletries. He picked up his phone and typed out a message to his mother, who was still recovering at home. "Need some time to clear my head. Going to Dad's cabin. I'll be back when I figure things out. Love you." The 3-hour drive north felt like an escape from the suffocating pressure of Miami. As concrete towers gave way to rolling countryside, Ryder felt his shoulders begin to relax for the first time in days. The familiar route brought back memories of childhood weekends spent fishing with his father, learning to bait hooks and clean catches while absorbing quiet lessons about patience and humility. The cabin's gravel driveway was overgrown with weeds when he arrived. Inside, a layer of dust covered everything, and the air smelled musty from months of disuse. Ryder opened all the windows, letting in fresh spring breeze. He found the generator still worked, providing basic power for lights and the small refrigerator. That first afternoon, he walked the property's perimeter, reacquainting himself with the peaceful solitude. The steady chirping of birds and rustling leaves felt like a balm to his raw nerves. Near the woodpile, he discovered his father's old axe, its handle smooth from years of use. Without really thinking about it, Ryder picked up the axe and began chopping. The physical labor felt good, therapeutic even. Each swing and crack of splitting wood provided a rhythm to match his thoughts. Sweat soaked through his designer shirt, now streaked with dirt and pine sap. "I deserve this," he muttered between swings. "All of it." Back in Miami, Tessa tried to maintain her normal routine at the Marine Rescue Center. She arrived early each morning, checking on the recovering animals and preparing their medications. But her usual focus was fractured, her mind constantly drifting back to the leaked video and its aftermath. "You seem distracted today," her co-worker Sarah commented, as Tessa accidentally knocked over a stack of feeding charts. "Still thinking about everything?" Tessa nodded, gathering the scattered papers. "Something just feels wrong about all this. The timing, the way it all happened." During her lunch break, she found herself re-watching news coverage of the scandal on her phone. The edited video showed Ryder in what appeared to be a board meeting, laughing about staging the perfect viral moment and making everyone believe the redemption story. At the cabin, Ryder spent his days in simple physical tasks. He repaired loose boards on the deck, cleared fallen branches from the paths, and continued chopping firewood even though the spring weather didn't require it. In the evenings, he sat at his father's old desk, writing in a leather-bound journal he'd found in a drawer. "Dear Tessa," one entry began. I know you probably won't ever read this, but I need to write it anyway. The truth is, I was exactly the kind of person you thought I was when we first met years ago. Arrogant, entitled, cruel. I didn't see it then. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. He filled pages with similar letters. To his mother, to his ex-wife, to his young son, to the employees he'd hurt over the years. Each one was an exercise in brutal honesty, forcing himself to confront the full weight of his past actions. Meanwhile, Tessa's nights grew restless. She tossed and turned, her mind racing with questions that wouldn't quiet down. After another sleepless evening, she decided to do some deeper research. She created a timeline of events, noting inconsistencies that had been bothering her. The board meeting shown in the leaked video, Ryder wore a blue tie and white shirt. But in photos from that same week, he'd been wearing different clothes. The lighting in the video seemed odd too, somehow both harsh and muted at the same time. She started digging through social media posts, cross-referencing dates and details. Something about the audio seemed off, the way Ryder's voice echoed differently than others in the room, how certain phrases seemed to cut together too cleanly. At the cabin, Ryder's days took on a simple rhythm. Wake at dawn, make coffee on the old stovetop, spend the morning doing physical work around the property. Afternoons were for reflection and writing. He began to understand what the elderly veteran at the community center had meant about stopping being the star of his own show. One evening, sitting on the deck watching the sunset, he wrote, "Maybe the worst part isn't losing everything. Maybe it's realizing I never really earned any of it in the first place. I built my whole life around being seen, being praised, being important. What happens when all that goes away? Who am I without the audience?" Tessa's investigation continued to nag at her. During a quiet moment at work, she pulled up the original gala live stream, comparing it to various news reports and social media clips. She noticed how certain outlets had subtly edited the sequence of events, changing the context of reactions and responses. That night, unable to sleep again, she sat cross-legged on her bed with her laptop open, surrounded by notes and screenshots. The leaked board meeting video played on repeat as she studied every detail, every transition, every audio spike. Around midnight, something clicked. A slight digital artifact at the edge of the frame, a barely noticeable jump in the audio. She leaned closer to the screen, heart pounding. "Something isn't right," she whispered, reaching for the replay button once more. The video played again, but this time she noticed what she'd been missing, the subtle signs of digital manipulation that her tired mind had finally pieced together. The revelation sat heavy in her chest as the midnight hour ticked past, leaving her with more questions than answers about who might have wanted to destroy Ryder's reputation so thoroughly. The morning sun filtered through Tessa's apartment blinds as she spread her investigation materials across her kitchen table. Coffee grew cold in her mug while she made phone calls, cross-referenced timestamps, and dug through old company records she'd saved from her time at Ryder's Corporation. Something about the leaked video still bothered her. The lighting seemed artificially enhanced, and the audio quality varied oddly between speakers. She needed someone who had been there, someone who knew the company's inner workings. With trembling fingers, she dialed a number she hadn't used in years. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" "Hi, Marcus. It's Tessa Morgan. I know it's been a while, but I need to ask you something about when we worked together at Quinn Technologies." There was a pause on the line. "I was wondering if you'd call after everything that happened. That video seemed off to me, too." Tessa sat up straighter. "So you noticed it?" "Listen." Marcus lowered his voice. "I still work there. Can we meet somewhere private? There's something you should know." An hour later, they sat in a quiet corner of a local coffee shop. Marcus looked nervous, constantly glancing around as he spoke. "It was Gregory Wells. one of the senior executives. He's been gunning for Ryder's position for months. After the Shark Tank incident, he saw his chance. Tessa leaned forward. What do you mean? Wells had access to the security system. He pulled footage from different board meetings, spliced things together. The timestamps were easy to manipulate. Marcus pulled out his phone, showing her emails he'd discovered. Look at these. 3 months before the gala, Ryder was actually trying to change the company culture. He sent out memos about stopping harassment, ending prank videos, creating a more professional environment. Tessa's hands shook as she read the messages. There it was in black and white, Ryder attempting to make real changes, pushing back against the toxic culture he'd helped create. Why didn't anyone say anything? She whispered. Wells threatened people's jobs. He has dirt on half the board members. Marcus glanced at his watch. I should go. But Tessa, Ryder wasn't lying about trying to change. The video was a hit job. After Marcus left, Tessa sat alone, her mind racing. She thought about Ryder's genuine attempts at redemption, his humility at the Marine Center, the way he'd connected with the seniors at the community lunch. She'd been so quick to believe the worst when the video surfaced. With renewed purpose, she drove to Ryder's mother's house. The modest 2-story home looked tired in the afternoon light, much like its owner when she opened the door. Mrs. Quinn, Tessa said, I need to talk to you about Ryder. I found something important. Ryder's mother welcomed her inside, the lines around her eyes, deep with worry. They sat in a sunny kitchen while Tessa explained everything, the doctored video, Wells' manipulation, the evidence of Ryder's attempts at reform. I knew something wasn't right, his mother said softly. Ryder was changing, really changing. I could see it in his eyes. Do you know where he is? I need to tell him the truth. Mrs. Quinn nodded slowly. He's at his father's old cabin, about 2 hours north, in the woods near Lake Morrison. She wrote down directions on a notepad. He needs to know this, Tessa. He's been carrying so much guilt. The sun was already low in the sky when Tessa started driving. She followed country roads that wound through dense forests, her headlights cutting through growing shadows. Her GPS signal grew weaker as she ventured deeper into the wilderness. Her mind wandered to all the moments she'd witnessed during Ryder's volunteer work. His genuine struggle with simple tasks, his growing humility, the way he'd stopped trying to charm or impress anyone. She thought about his trembling voice at the senior center when he'd confessed his failures. The gravel road turned to dirt. Tree branches scraped against her car's sides. Just when she wondered if she'd taken a wrong turn, she saw it, a warm glow between the trees. A small cabin appeared, smoke rising from its chimney into the darkening sky. Tessa pulled to a stop, her headlights illuminating the wooden structure. Through the windows, she could see lights flickering, probably from a fireplace. Her heart pounded as she switched off the engine. The truth had led her here, through twisted paths of deception and revelation. Now she just had to find the courage to share it. She sat for a moment, watching the cabin lights dance between the trees, gathering her thoughts before taking the final steps toward setting things right. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Tessa stepped out of her car, the air heavy with the promise of rain. The cabin sat nestled among towering pines, their branches swaying in the strengthening wind. Through the gathering dusk, she spotted a lone figure on the wooden porch, silhouetted against the silvery surface of the lake beyond. Ryder sat motionless in an old Adirondack chair, shoulders slumped, staring out at the choppy water. He didn't turn when her footsteps creaked on the wooden steps, but she saw his jaw tighten. If you've come to tell me what a fraud I am, he said quietly, save your breath. I already know. Tessa moved closer, wrapping her arms around herself as the wind picked up. That's not why I'm here. Now he did look at her, his eyes hollow and red-rimmed. The confident CEO was gone, replaced by someone who looked lost and broken. A few drops of rain began to fall, pattering softly on the roof. "I found out the truth about the video," she said. "About Gregory Wells." Ryder's brow furrowed. "What?" "He doctored the footage, manipulated timestamps, created a false narrative to destroy you." The words tumbled out as thunder crashed closer. "I spoke to Marcus from IT. He showed me the original emails, the ones where you were trying to change the company culture months ago." Rain began falling in earnest now, but neither of them moved. Ryder stared at her, disbelief warring with a desperate hope in his eyes. You believe me?" His voice cracked. "I do, and I'm sorry I didn't before." Tessa hugged herself tighter as the rain increased. "I should have looked deeper instead of assuming the worst." Ryder shook his head, pushing himself up from the chair. "Don't apologize. After what I did to you years ago, after the gala, you didn't owe me any benefit of the doubt." A particularly strong gust of wind drove the rain sideways, and Ryder seemed to snap out of his daze. "We should go inside before we're soaked through." He led her into the cabin, where a fire crackled in a stone fireplace. The interior was simple but cozy. Worn leather furniture, braided rugs, and walls lined with old fishing photos. Ryder added another log to the fire while Tessa stood warming her hands. "My father built this place," he said softly, straightening up. "Spent every summer here when I was growing up. It was the only place where he wasn't CEO of Quinn Technologies. He was just Dad." Tessa settled onto the weathered couch, watching the flames dance. "Tell me about him?" Something in Ryder's face softened as he sat in a nearby armchair. "He was complicated, brilliant businessman, terrible at expressing emotions. But out here," he gestured at the cabin, "he'd teach me to fish, tell terrible jokes, actually listen when I talked." "What happened to him?" "Heart attack. 5 years ago." Ryder's voice grew quiet. "His last words to me were, 'Don't lose yourself to that company, son.' I didn't listen." Rain drummed steadily on the roof as silence settled between them. Finally, Tessa spoke. "I lost my parents young. Car accident. My grandmother raised me." "The woman who encouraged you to attend the mediation." Tessa nodded. "She taught me about forgiveness, about seeing the whole person beyond their mistakes. I haven't always been good at following that advice." "You're better at it than most." Ryder leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The day you reported that harassment case, I remember dismissing it without even really reading it. I was so caught up in maintaining this image of a cool, edgy CEO that I couldn't see the real damage being done. It nearly broke me," Tessa admitted. "Not just losing the job, but feeling like my voice didn't matter, like I didn't matter. I'm so sorry." The words came out rough with emotion. "I know it's not enough, but I am truly sorry." Thunder boomed overhead as they fell quiet again, each lost in memories. The fire popped and hissed, sending sparks up the chimney. "When I was 12, Tessa said suddenly, "I rescued a baby bird that fell from its nest, spent weeks nursing it back to health. That's when I knew I wanted to work. With animals, they don't judge, they just respond to kindness." Ryder smiled slightly. "Is that why you knew what to do in the shark tank?" "Partly. Though I have to admit, saving the guy who pushed me in wasn't exactly in my training manual." To her surprise, Ryder laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to surprise him too. "I was terrified, all that bravado gone in an instant, and there you were, so calm, so capable." "Honestly, I was scared too, but sometimes being brave means acting in spite of fear." The storm began to soften, rain gentling to a steady patter. Ryder got up to add more wood to the fire, movements careful and deliberate. "You know what scares me now?" he said, still facing the flames. "That I'll fall back into old patterns, that all this change, all this growth, it won't stick. Change isn't a destination, Tessa replied. It's a journey. You just have to keep choosing it day after day. He turned to look at her, firelight casting shadows across his face. How did you become so wise? Life experience, and a very patient grandmother. They shared a smile, the tension between them dissolving like morning mist. Outside, the storm continued to ease, but inside the cabin, something was strengthening. Not quite friendship, but understanding. Recognition of shared humanity, of pain and growth and possibility. As the fire crackled and the rain whispered against the windows, they continued talking about childhood dreams, about failures and victories, about the moments that had shaped them into who they were. The conversation flowed naturally now, no longer weighted by anger or suspicion. In the warm glow of the cabin, they were simply two people finding common ground, their past roles of victim and perpetrator transforming into something more nuanced, more real. The storm outside had cleared the air, just as truth had cleared the space between them. Dawn broke over the lake with gentle fingers of light spreading across the water. Inside the cabin, Ryder stood at the kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching a pair of cardinals flit between the pine branches. Tessa sat at the worn wooden table, her laptop open before her. Are you sure about this? She asked, adjusting the screen's angle. Ryder turned from the window, his face etched with determination. No more PR teams, no more polished statements, just the truth. He settled into the chair beside her, running a hand through his disheveled hair. The kitchen was simple. Exposed beams overhead, well-loved appliances, family photos yellowing on the walls. It felt right, somehow, to do this here. Ready? Tessa's finger hovered over the live stream button. Ryder took a deep breath. Ready? The red recording light blinked on. Tessa faced the camera with quiet confidence. Hi everyone. I'm Tessa Morgan. Yes, the woman from the Shark Tank incident. I'm here with Ryder Quinn because there's something important you need to know. She began explaining, methodically, presenting the evidence she'd uncovered about the rival executive's manipulation of footage, the doctored timestamps, the orchestrated leak. Her voice remained steady, professional, but there was an undercurrent of compassion as she spoke. The video you saw was deliberately edited to make it appear that Ryder had planned everything, but that's not the full story. Ryder leaned forward, his usual polish stripped away. His voice cracked as he spoke. Before I address the leak, I need to talk about something more important. I've been living behind a carefully crafted image for years. The cool CEO, the prankster, the guy who never took anything seriously. But that image hurt people. Real people. He looked directly into the camera, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. Years ago, Tessa reported harassment and discrimination at my company. I dismissed it without a second thought. I fired her for speaking up. That wasn't just a mistake, it was wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. Comments began flooding in as he spoke. Some skeptical, some supportive, all engaged. The Shark Tank incident wasn't planned, but it wasn't random either. It was the culmination of years of treating people as props for entertainment, of valuing image over humanity. When I fell into that tank, terrified for my life, Tessa could have let me drown. She had every right to. Instead, she saved me. Tessa watched him as he continued, seeing the genuine pain and regret in his expression. That moment changed everything. The past few weeks of community service, of working under Tessa's guidance at the Marine Rescue Center, of listening to seniors and veterans share their stories. It's shown me who I really was, and who I want to become. He straightened in his chair, voice growing stronger. I'm announcing today the creation of the Second Chance Foundation. Every cent of my frozen accounts, over $20 million, will go towards supporting workers who face harassment and discrimination, not just with legal aid, but with job placement, emotional support, and advocacy. The comment section exploded. Viewers from across the country began sharing their own stories of workplace harassment, of speaking up and being silenced, of needing exactly this kind of support. This foundation won't erase my past actions. Ryder continued, nothing can, but maybe it can help create a better future for others. And Tessa has agreed to serve as executive director, ensuring the foundation stays true to its mission. Tessa nodded, adding, change is possible. I've witnessed it firsthand, but it requires honesty, accountability, and a genuine desire to do better. They continued talking, answering questions from viewers with raw honesty. No topic was off limits. Ryder spoke about his ego, his failures as a father, his gradual awakening to his own privilege and responsibility. Tessa shared her journey from anger to understanding, emphasizing that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. As the livestream stretched past 2 hours, messages of support poured in from unexpected places. Senior citizens from the community center posted about the genuine changes they'd witnessed in Ryder. Veterans shared wisdom about redemption and second chances. Mothers wrote about showing the video to their children as a lesson in accountability and growth. Finally, they wrapped up the stream, both emotionally drained but lighter somehow. The truth had been freeing. Thank you for watching, Tessa concluded. Sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones that need telling most. The red light blinked off. Silence filled the kitchen, broken only by the gentle lap of waves against the shore outside. Ryder's phone buzzed. He picked it up, then froze, staring at the screen. What is it? Tessa asked softly. He turned the phone so she could see. It was a message from his 11-year-old son. Dad, I'm proud of you. Ryder's composure crumbled. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he read the words again and again. His shoulders shook with silent sobs, not the dramatic tears of his past public apologies, but the quiet weeping of genuine emotion. Tessa reached across the table and rested her hand gently on his arm. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. In that moment, the simple touch said everything necessary about compassion, about healing, about the long journey of becoming better than we were. The morning sun streamed through the cabin windows, painting patterns on the wooden floor as Ryder wiped his eyes, his son's message glowing on the screen like a beacon of hope. The Second Chance Foundation opened its doors on a bright Monday morning in September. Housed in a renovated warehouse near the waterfront, its exposed brick walls and welcoming open spaces created an atmosphere of warmth and accessibility. Tessa had insisted on making the environment feel different from traditional corporate offices. No cold marble lobbies or intimidating security desks. We want people to feel safe here, she'd explained during the planning phase. Like they can breathe. In those first weeks, the community response exceeded all expectations. Local businesses donated office furniture. Volunteer lawyers offered pro bono services. Social workers and counselors reached out wanting to help. The $20 million from Ryder's accounts provided a solid foundation, but it was the grassroots support that truly brought the project to life. Tessa settled naturally into her role as program director, her days filled with meeting survivors of workplace harassment, coordinating support services, and building networks with other advocacy groups. She moved through the building with quiet confidence, her presence bringing calm to even the most difficult situations. Ryder, meanwhile, worked diligently as a volunteer counselor, starting at the very bottom. He sat in on training sessions, took notes, and learned to listen more than he spoke. His office was the smallest in the building, his choice. Some days he simply made coffee and organized files, tasks that would have been unthinkable in his CEO days. How are you adjusting? Tessa asked one afternoon, finding him sorting through donation receipts. Honestly, He looked up, a tired smile crossing his face. "I've never felt more useful." The transformation in him was evident to everyone. Gone were the designer suits and carefully styled hair. He dressed simply now, often wearing the Foundation's blue volunteer shirt. His former employees, seeing the change, began reaching out. "I remember when you first started the company." One email read, "You were different then, more human. It's good to see that person again." Each message of forgiveness touched him deeply. He kept a folder of them, not out of pride, but as reminders of both accountability and hope. His mother's health improved dramatically as the weeks passed. The stress that had sent her to the hospital lifted as she watched her son's genuine transformation. She became a regular visitor at the Foundation, often bringing homemade cookies for the staff and sitting with clients who needed a maternal presence. "You know what makes me happiest?" she told him one day, watching him help a young woman fill out paperwork. "Seeing you serve others without expecting anything in return." The media's tone shifted gradually but noticeably. Headlines about the Shark Tank CEO gave way to stories about workplace reform and community healing. Local news stations covered the Foundation's workshops. National magazines requested interviews about corporate accountability and redemption. Tessa handled most media requests, protecting Ryder from falling back into old patterns of seeking attention. When reporters asked about their relationship, she kept responses professional and focused on the work. But something was changing between them, subtle as the shifting of tides. They found themselves working late more often, sharing takeout dinners while discussing program expansions. Their conversations flowed easier, punctuated by genuine laughter. They developed a shorthand for communicating across crowded rooms, a raised eyebrow here, a slight nod there. One particularly successful evening, after a workshop where former executives spoke about changing toxic workplace culture, they decided to take a walk along the waterfront. The September air carried just a hint of autumn crispness, mixed with the eternal smell of salt and sea. "Did you ever imagine this?" Tessa asked, gesturing back toward the Foundation's building, its windows still glowing warmly in the dusk. Ryder shook his head. "Never. I was too busy imagining my next viral moment, my next acquisition. All that seems so empty now." They walked in comfortable silence, their shoes clicking softly on the wooden planks of the boardwalk. Small boats bobbed in their slips, their masts creating a forest of shadows against the darkening sky. "My grandmother says everything happens for a reason," Tessa mused. "Even the bad things." "Your grandmother is very wise," Ryder said softly. "I think about that night at the gala a lot. How terrified I was in that tank. How you could have just—" "Let you drown?" Tessa finished. "That wasn't who I am. And this person you're becoming, I don't think that was ever who you really were either." Their walk led them to the end of a long pier. They paused there, leaning against the railing. Below them, the ocean reflected the lights of the city, creating patterns that danced and shifted with each gentle wave. The breeze picked up slightly, carrying the distant sound of boat horns and seabirds. Ryder felt a deep sense of peace settle over him, not the artificial calm of his meditation apps or executive retreats, but something real and lasting. They stood close enough that their shoulders nearly touched, both looking out over the water. Neither spoke about what might come next, about the complex journey from enemies to colleagues to something yet undefined. For now, it was enough to stand in this moment, watching the lights shimmer on the endless ocean, feeling the weight of the past lifting with each salty breeze. The morning sun painted Miami's skyline in shades of rose and gold as Tessa stood before her bathroom mirror, rehearsing her speech for the 100th time. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her navy blue blazer, chosen carefully for the non-profit's grand opening celebration. "You've got this," she whispered to her reflection, channeling her grandmother's unwavering confidence. The foundation, dedicated to supporting workplace harassment victims and promoting cultural change in corporations, represented months of hard work, late nights, and countless moments of doubt. Across town, Ryder was already at the venue, methodically arranging chairs in neat rows. He had insisted on doing the physical setup himself, refusing to hire event staff. Each chair he placed felt like a small act of penance, a reminder of how far he'd come from his CEO days. "Need any help?" called out Jerome, the senior veteran who had become a regular volunteer. He watched Ryder adjust another row of chairs with military precision. "I've got it, thanks," Ryder replied, wiping his brow. "Though I wouldn't mind some of your famous advice right about now. I'm pretty nervous about today." Jerome chuckled, settling into one of the chairs. "Nervous is good. Means you care about doing right by people. That's a far cry from the man I first met." The venue slowly came alive as volunteers arrived, hanging banners and arranging refreshments. The conference room, once cold and corporate, transformed into a warm, welcoming space. Photos lined the walls, workshop participants, community events, success stories, each one representing a life touched by their work. Tessa arrived an hour before the ceremony, clutching her note cards and a travel mug of tea. She found Ryder adjusting, a crooked banner, his sleeves rolled up and tie slightly askew. "The place looks amazing," she said, taking in the transformed space. Ryder turned, his face lighting up at her presence. "Thanks. I hope I got everything right. The chairs are exactly 18 inches apart, just like you specified." "Of course they are." She laughed, the sound easing some of their shared tension. "Have you finished your speech?" He patted his pocket where a folded paper sat. "Yeah, though I'm not sure I'll need it. Some things you just need to speak from the heart, you know?" The guests began arriving. Community leaders, former workshop participants, donors, and most importantly, the people they hoped to help. Tessa's grandmother arrived early, resplendent in her Sunday best, pulling both Tessa and Ryder into warm hugs. "I'm so proud of you both," she said, her eyes twinkling. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, doesn't he?" As the room filled, Tessa felt her nervousness transform into determination. These people weren't here to judge. They were here to support, to believe, to hope. She watched as Ryder greeted each guest personally, remembering names, asking about families, showing genuine interest in their lives. The ceremony began with a welcome from their board chair, followed by testimonials from program participants. Each story highlighted the foundation's impact. Jobs recovered, confidence restored, dignity reclaimed. Tessa found herself blinking back tears more than once. When it was her turn to speak, she approached the podium with steady steps. Her prepared speech sat before her, but as she looked out at the faces in the crowd, her grandmother's proud smile, Jerome's encouraging nod, the hopeful eyes of future participants, she knew exactly what to say. "6 months ago, I thought I knew exactly who my enemies were," she began. "I had built walls around my heart, convinced that some people couldn't change, that some wounds couldn't heal. I was wrong." She spoke about transformation, not just Ryder's, but her own, about learning to balance justice with mercy, accountability with forgiveness, about building something meaningful from the ashes of trauma. When Ryder took the stage after her, the room fell silent. Gone was the polished CEO persona, replaced by something raw and real. He spoke without referring to his notes, his voice thick with emotion. "I stand before you today because of one person's extraordinary capacity for grace," he said, turning to look at Tessa. "You saved me twice. once from the sharks and once from myself. When everyone else had given up on me, you showed me a path to redemption. Not an easy path, but a true one." The audience's applause was genuine and warm, filling the room with the sound of hope. As the formal ceremony concluded and people mingled over refreshments, Tessa slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, creating long shadows across the parking lot. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning that it was Ryder. "That was quite a speech," she said as he came to stand beside her. "I meant every word," he replied quietly. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the play of light and shadow. "Tessa." His voice held a note of uncertainty she'd never heard before. "I was wondering, would you consider having dinner with me sometime? Not as foundation director and board member, but just as us, two people starting over." The question hung in the air between them, delicate as soap bubbles. Tessa turned to look at him, really look at him. The humility in his stance, the hope in his eyes, the person he'd become. A soft smile spread across her face. "Yes," she said simply. "I'd like that." Relief and joy flickered across his features. They began walking toward the parking lot, their conversation flowing naturally from the ceremony to future plans, to shared memories of the past months. "Remember when Jerome made me scrub all those floors at the community center?" Ryder laughed. "He said it would build character." Tessa reminded him. "I think he was right." Their steps fell into an easy rhythm, matching pace without conscious thought. The late afternoon light caught the windows of passing cars, creating brief flashes of brilliance. Everything felt possible in that golden hour: healing, growth, connection. Neither of them was perfect. They both carried scars, lessons learned the hard way, moments they wished they could change. But as they walked together, trading stories and gentle teasing, there was a sense of rightness to it all. They had built something beautiful from the wreckage, not just the foundation, but trust, understanding, and now, perhaps, something more. The future stretched before them like the parking lot, ordinary yet full of possibility. They were ready to face it, not as the people they had been, but as the people they had become. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Ryder's new office at the non-profit center. It was a modest space, nothing like his former executive suite, but it felt more like home than any corporate office ever had. He arrived just after 7 o'clock in the morning, humming softly as he organized files for their upcoming support programs. His mind kept drifting back to Tessa's smile when she'd agreed to dinner. The door creaked open around 8:30, and Tessa appeared with 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," she said, setting one on his desk. "You're a lifesaver," he replied, gratefully accepting the cup. They settled into an easy conversation about the overwhelming response to yesterday's opening. "The phone hasn't stopped ringing," Tessa shared. "We've got 25 new volunteer applications just since last night. And 15 workers already signed up for next week's support group," Ryder added, his voice warm with pride. Throughout the day they moved in perfect sync, guiding clients through intake processes, hosting a passionate meeting with their senior volunteers, and drafting partnership proposals for organizations across the city. Each interaction felt natural, strengthening the trust they'd built over months of healing and growth. As the sun began its descent, painting the office in soft orange light, they gathered their things and locked up together. The walk to the cafe was quiet but comfortable, both aware of how far they'd come since that fateful night at the gala. At the crosswalk, they paused, sharing a quiet smile that spoke volumes, of forgiveness earned, of wounds finally healed, and of a future they were ready to build, side by side. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe. And tomorrow, I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.